White people don't have culture because white people is a concept that was created to justify the discrimination of black people in America. Before 1950, Irish people weren't considered white, and Italians were hung by the KKK, and today, Arab Americans are still legally considered white. Whiteness as a whole is an excuse. It's a way of both oppressing people of color by making them an outgroup, but also a way of getting rid of Irish culture and Germanic and Balkan culture, whatever, by forcing all white people to feed into the machine of imperialism and giving up their cultures in exchange for being in the in-group. If we want to fight against colonialism and imperialism, we need to fight against the excuse. We need to fight against capitalism and the whiteness that upholds it. So recognize your privilege as a white person while also embracing your true heritage. My ancestors were Irish, but I still benefit from being white in America because all of our histories were taken from us. I'm lucky that I even know where my ancestors are from because many black Americans do not have that privilege. So please fight against American culture and nationalism and do research about your ancestors. Fight against the concept of an in-group or out-group, not by denying its very real existence, but by pushing for change.
So I want to talk about this because I think it's something that gets misunderstood a lot. But when we say whiteness, we're talking about a power structure. We're not just talking about white people. Like, whiteness was literally made in order to oppose blackness. And originally it didn't even include Irish people or Italians or Jewish people. Those groups were racialized differently when they first arrived here, right? But whiteness didn't expand because those communities sat around and were like, oh, we want to be white. It's like, no, it expanded because the power structure needed more numbers. Like, after emancipation and Reconstruction, like, all of the wealthy white people in this country realized that if the poor Europeans aligned with black Americans, you'd have this cross-racial working class coalition, and that would just threaten their wealth and their ownership. So they expanded their racial category to include more people. They didn't do it to be kind, though. It was literally a political strategy. Because once you can create a racial hierarchy, you don't need white people to be rich. You just need them to believe that they're above someone else, which is exactly what Lyndon B. Johnson said. And that's why anti-blackness is what this country runs on. When we say that this country was built on the backs of black people, we literally mean that subordinating us became the floor that everything else stood on. And so many immigrants, they assimilated for safety. I get that. Like, blending in meant more access, protection, survival, and for some, I'm sure, it meant participating in anti-blackness and benefiting from it, right? But they wanted to get access just like black Americans that fought for integration to gain access, because all of those things were held from them. They were held from us too. The difference is that black Americans never had the option to assimilate out of our race. And not that any of us would want to. Like, I love being black, but that was never available to us. Like, we're very visible. We can't blend in. So when black people now talk about people choosing whiteness over doing kind of what's right and equality, right? It's not, I mean, kind of is some blame, but it's about how you're choosing to participate in the system. Did you challenge it from within, or did you just benefit from it? And that's a really layered conversation that I think a lot of people are avoiding. But by and large, whiteness is the problem. And if dismantling whiteness, like, as a power structure.
Hello, beautiful people. What's up, everyone? How you doing? I'm hoping that you're doing great from wherever you're watching this video from. And as you know, I'm your host on Praise and Tech Stories, and thank you for taking your time. Thank you for everything. Brothers and sisters, there is a concept that I want us to talk about, and I think the people that are featured on this video really describe this. Something went wrong with whiteness. It is not as perfect as you think, as you all might think. Something wrong happened. Remember, it was never meant to go haywire. It was never meant to go wrong. It was all planned, and thoughtfully they thought that this will remain perfect. Remember, the creation of whiteness came with the suffering of black people. Yes, it is just like an exchange, like they tried to do. So when one group shoot up, the other group shoot down. But remember, that brings us to a topic when black people and white people are like this. And that's during the time of the Back-on Rebellion. Usually, you'll understand that I've been talking about this for a long time. It is because I want people to understand this part of history. Remember, during the Bacons Rebellion, and I like how Jacqueline Batalora describes it. Jacqueline Batalora is a white professor. Normally, she talks about the social sciences, psychology, in regards to race, history, and everything. So she talks about the creation of whiteness and how whiteness came to be. The creation of whiteness came with the suffering of black people. Yes. So during the Bacons Rebellion, blacks and white, they were working. They were working people. All these people were working. There was nothing like you're white and black. There was no color. And so since, due to the fear of the elites, they saw that let's do something that will make white people feel better. Oh, let's use their color. Let's say that whiteness is associated with being superior. And let's say that blackness is associated with being down. So this is what they did. Since the elites are so smart, and even the problem with the United States today, again, is the elites. And you all are getting to see how they played white people. Because as time went by, something wrong happened with whiteness. So this is what happened. Stay tuned, brothers and sisters. The elites sat down. And when the elites sat down, they saw to it that, oh, these people one day might overthrow us because they're becoming so powerful. And there's nothing that these people fear like unity. So this is what they did. They decided to create whiteness. And how did they do this? They created perceived privileges. They started giving white people privileges over black folks. And that's how white people had this inflated superiority that they had. But deep down, something went wrong with whiteness. And so, brothers and sisters, stay tuned as we discuss this. As you know, I'm your host and presenter, Agentic Stories, and stay tuned. I'm gonna be back. Right. Thank you.
Feels like losing something, then it might tell you what you were gaining from it in the first place.
You know why it's so hard for a lot of white people to admit our complicity and active hand in racism and white supremacy and understand that systemic racism is real? Here's one of the reasons. Because if you as a white person begin to understand and believe that, that means your mom and dad were wrong. Your grandparents were wrong. Your teachers were wrong. Everything you've learned about history is wrong. The shit you've heard about cops is wrong. The entire foundation of this country that you know it to be, that has been taught to you, you will realize you were lied to. Everything you know about the criminal justice system, schools, banks, fucking housing, credit, food deserts, the medical field, the mental health field. You're going to realize everything that you were taught about that shit if you've never addressed white supremacy or racism. You're going to understand internally, if you start to unpack that, all that shit was wrong. You've been lied to. This is why so many white people want to return to this perceived right to comfort, because it creates an internal panic. When you realize your entire fucking foundation was formed and created and uplifted upon lies, white supremacy, white violence, racism, dehumanization, you're going to deconstruct all of that shit if you choose to. And what you're going to be left with is yourself. And then you have to understand, I have to understand the complicity in the active hand in the role that I carry out in racism, in white supremacy. And instead of saying, holy fuck, dude, I was wrong about everything. Everything was a lie. Everything, race really does play into everything. Instead of doing that, the gut reaction is to push back against people who have the Black, indigenous people, persons of color experience in this country, to push back against them and tell them that they don't know their history, that their life experience is wrong. You see how that's not logical at all? I always say, once you start pulling the string on the sweater, everything will fucking unravel. And that leads to an identity crisis, which will force you back into being comfortable so you don't have to address yourself, so you don't have to address your family members, so you don't have to address your friends or your churches. Or it will cause you to radically change to a point where you might lose everything, but will find your humanity instead. Choose your humanity. Choose to walk away from whiteness forever.
So many non-white people around the world want to be white or accepted by whites. Now, this is a provocative question. It's also a rhetorical question. I already know the answer to this question. And before you say, no, that's not true, I don't want to be white, I don't know anyone who wants to be white. So before you go down that road, let me just tell you, the data is overwhelming. Okay? So let's just face the fact that some serious psychological and mental damage has been done to non-white people by white people, causing many non-white people to subconsciously, at least subconsciously, want to be white or to be accepted by whites.
So I'm going to tell y'all something that's going to blow your motherfucking head off, especially white people today. I want you to take a good look at your skin. Look at your skin tone. I want you to take a really good look at it and ask yourself where you think it came from, and ask yourself, how old do you think the skin that you're looking at right now, that white, pale, some of it flaky, some of it itchy, some of it red, pink, some of it may be moisturized. Who knows? It might have a little vitamin D up in there. But I want you to take a good look at it and ask yourself, how old is this skin? Like, how long has it been the European standard for Europeans? And I'm going to answer that question for you. How old do you think white skin is? You're going to be shocked. It's about 3,000 to 6,000 years old. Early Caucasians from the Caucasus Mountains had dark skin and blue eyes. The white skin trait literally just became the standard about 3,000 to 6,000 years ago. Look it up. I lie to you not. Early Caucasians were dark skinned with blue eyes. They believed that there was a genetic adaptation because there was a lack of sunlight where they were, and the skin had a lack of vitamin D because they switched from vitamin D rich meat to vitamin D poor grains. And that is what mutated the skin into what it is. Now, you don't gotta take my word for it. Look this shit up. I am shocked myself. I thought it was gonna be, thousands. Well, I knew white people wasn't here longer than black people, but I thought that it was at least gonna say like 50,000 years or something like that. No. Only 3,000 to 6,000 years old is the white skin that we see today has been here. Yet they claim they're the original people. I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that.
We're going to talk about whiteness in a way that I haven't heard it in a lot of other places, but this is what went wrong. Like, if you ever wanted to know what went wrong, like, this is what went wrong. Like, what? Like, you ever looked at them and, wondered how they all made these crazy decisions? This is how it happened. Okay. Like, the betrayal was against memory itself. So it didn't start with slavery or colonization. Those were actually symptoms of a greater issue. It began when white identity was constructed by erasing rootedness. European tribes like the Irish, the Scots, the Germans, the Norse, they did have indigenous ways of living, right? Of being. Seasonal living, oral storytelling, grief rituals, communal economies. When empire logic, Rome, Catholic Church, feudalism, consolidated power in Europe, it forced those people to forget their rootedness and to replace memory with domination. The root was severed, survival through control. They didn't metabolize anything, not connection, right? Just control again. This was the first recursion. This is when they turned in on themselves, right? The first rise of this unprocessed entropy inside whiteness. It's rootless survival. It's identity by domination. It's memory replaced by mythic supremacy. And then that's how you end up with expansion without metabolization. So when Europeans came to the New World, they didn't arrive whole, right? They arrived already severed, already looping. They didn't integrate the grief of losing old Europe. They exported it. They didn't mourn their exile from memory. They externalized it on the people they colonized. Conquest wasn't just greed, it was spiritual panic. Because if you're not rooted in memory, you only feel alive by expanding your domination, by making more land, more wealth, more slaves, more laws, more mirrors, and thus their entropy, their unprocessed experiences exploded. But it was coded as civilization. So when American identity was built, it wasn't metabolized selfhood. It was built on dumping these unprocessed experiences, these entropy onto others. So indigenous people got labeled uncivilized to offload their own severed ancestral memory, right? Black people were property to offload their terror of being spiritually homeless because they felt spiritually homeless. Immigrants were treated like threats to offload their fear of being spiritually replaceable. Projection became policy. Projection became culture. Projection became destiny. America never healed from Europe. It just renamed its wounds. So every genocide, right? Every stolen plantation, every gentrified city, every new suburb, every Wall Street boom, every school built on erasure, every church built without confession is material success reinforced. It is material success reinforced spiritual entropy. It is material success reinforcing, right, spiritual unprocessed experiences for them. So the more whiteness succeeded externally, the more it hollowed out internally. So their collective brokenness rose because every reward for survival was tied to a denial of memory, right? The maw grew, the silence deepened, the performance sharpened. So here's just the facts, right? It was really a bit of a 4-stage process. Severance from ancestral rootedness, loss of metabolized memory, survival through domination, entropy weaponizes progress, projection onto others, externalization of internal panic, and reinforcement through wealth. So that it looped, got hardened in the culture. So white America's original sin is not slavery. It's the refusal to mourn the first loss of rootedness. So this is all just a disgusting projection. It's really this humiliating. Like I want people to sit with that. Like, we're watching them grieve in public. All of this is grief. All of it. Rape, slavery, genocide, imperialism. Those were the fevered dreams of a people trying not to remember what it felt like to be abandoned by their own history. So every time memory tried to return, they doubled the performance instead of softening. This is why black people look so nasty to them. Because if we can build a culture, even in the midst of that, of exile, it makes all of this grief look meaningless. It has to be destroyed in that way, right? So they have no home. You ask a black person where it all starts from. You might say you might get answers like slavery in Africa. You ask a white person, you'll hear Europe. Okay, but you hear exactly the same. Africa, Europe, they're as disconnected, if not worse, and they've been materially rewarded for it through this reinforcement. So this was a crazy deep take, but this is exactly what's going on, for sure.
Past year, America has demonstrated and reiterated that whiteness is a construct that the rich white elite made up, and they can take it away from people on a whim. To be clear, there was no white race in Europe. There were British and French and Germans and Italians. Their whiteness did not unify them or align their interests. Rather, these divergent groups of white people in Europe spent over 2,000 years attacking each other and going to war. It wasn't until the advent of the New World, and specifically the African slave trade, that was its economic engine, that the notion of a white race ever emerged. And it was not done altruistically by the white elites, but rather out of greed, necessity, and self-preservation. Being woefully outnumbered by Black people and the poor whites throughout the South, the white elite needed a way to divide and conquer, and also to placate these poor, uneducated, disenfranchised whites. Indeed, there were acts of rebellion and protest where poor whites and enslaved Black people stood together. By creating the myth of whiteness, the white elites were able to distract poor whites from the true source of their misery, the white land-owning rich elites, to focus on a people who were the only rung on the economic ladder worse off than them. And even then, there were levels to whiteness. The Irish and the Italians sat solidly below the WASP. And it worked. It worked during slavery. It worked in the sharecropping era that followed. It worked during Jim Crow. And it works today, where poor, uneducated, disenfranchised whites voted for a billionaire with nothing in common with them and no interest in them. The myth of whiteness pays dividends to the white aristocracy to this very day. But recent events have shown that just like whiteness can be granted, it can be taken away. Now, it's common white folks being murdered, and the supposed club of whiteness is nowhere to be found. The white elites have rescinded it, and these common white folks' eyes are being opened to the fact that they are not in the club. Actually, they never have been and never will be.
There is a difference between white people and people who happen to be white. White people ascribe to whiteness, especially in the US. They have privilege because of the color of their skin, and they don't acknowledge that. People who happen to be white are doing the work. They're trying to decolonize themselves. They're trying to unpack all of that white supremacy, capitalism nonsense that we've been force-fed since birth. I grew up in a multiracial household, and when I went to school as a child, I assumed everyone's household was like mine. Everyone has a Black mom and a white dad. Everyone has Black siblings and white siblings. Wrong. The other students made that very clear to me, that I was the weird one. I'm in my 40s. It has taken me this long to see it, glaringly see it. I saw it before, but I work with a lot of white women, a lot of white cishet women. And, you know, they're progressive. It's Washington State. Pro this, pro that. Except when it comes to genocide. They made that very clear to me that they don't want me to talk about it anymore. They didn't say those words, but they made it pretty clear. And the fact that they can just dismiss what's happening to the people in Palestine. It's hailing. That's not going to stop me. I can see now very clearly that these white women who ascribe to whiteness would be the same white women back in the day who are like, slavery, what are you going to do? Civil rights movement, they're destroying property. Those are the same people. They are. I know a lot of people who happen to be white who are allies, real allies. And by the way, you as a white person can't come into any marginalized community saying, I'm an ally. the marginalized community has to deem you an ally. You can't give yourself that title. Washington Weather doesn't want me to talk about this, but y'all need to work on yourselves. If you are a white person who ascribes to whiteness, you need to figure that shit out. The hailing stopped. Y'all, white people, y'all don't care about what's going on currently in Rafah. Do you even know that there's a ground invasion right now? Do you understand what's happening? Y'all don't care because it doesn't affect you. But it will, very soon. And that's not me threatening. That's our government sending our police force over there to train, to see how they do that over there, so that they can implement that. You see it at the campuses right now. They're beating up children, young people, macing them. People who happen to be white, thank you for doing the work, but you got to go talk to your folks. They'll listen to you, hopefully. And if they don't, write their name down. And then we'll remember. We'll remember them. So, have a good day.
You know, when I first saw this, I thought it was some sort of practical joke. But after doing a little research, I found out it's 100% true. The University of Minnesota has a webpage describing whiteness as a pandemic. Yes, you heard me. Whiteness is a pandemic. Let's take a look at what they consider a white pandemic is. There you go. Read through it. And you could read down at the bottom that they're facing backlash for it. I wonder why. Now let me show you how they want white parents to halt and stop this white pandemic. Let's take a look at this. There you go. How to stop white pandemic. They want white parents to re-educate their children. Re-educate their children from what? Being white? Are you kidding me? Now let's take a listen to this University of Minnesota professor talking about what a white pandemic is.
We posit that there is a whiteness pandemic behind the racism pandemic, and that this begins in the family system where young children are socialized into the culture of whiteness within white families. Our first recommendation is to remember that the whiteness pandemic is a pandemic. If you were born and raised in the United States, especially in a white family, then you've been raised in the pandemic, and you can play a role in halting and reversing this pandemic.
Are you kidding me? Are you serious? There's two pandemics I'm seeing. The first one is the fact that individuals in high school around this country in certain cities can't read first grade reading or do first grade math. That's a pandemic. Number two is the pandemic of white people being blamed for everything and the hate directed towards white people. That's another pandemic. Does this professor and the University of Minnesota think that this is going to bring people together? Clearly not, because they're facing a backlash from it. This is one of the most racist things I've seen and heard directed towards an entire race of people.
You gotta fuck with me for a minute. This is what Attica Torrance had to say on Facebook. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Whiteness has tricked white people into believing they were included in whiteness. The truth is, whiteness only cares about those that portray the tenets of whiteness. Here are 2 points that bolsters the main point. Kash Patel, Usha Vance, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and many others are not white, but they are willing to protect and defend whiteness. Thus, they are accepted in whiteness. Renee Good and Alex Preddy getting killed in Minneapolis was technically white, but they were not included in whiteness. That brings me to my next point. For a very long time, whiteness didn't want to market and advertise to white death. Therefore, although white people get shot and killed by law enforcement, we rarely see it advertised on the news or on any grand scale. We typically see law enforcement killing black children, black women, black men, black babies, black elders.
Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you are all doing great from wherever you're watching this video from. As you know, I'm your host and presenter, Agent Stories. Let's have a chat about this. Now, brothers and sisters, this is what is happening. Whiteness was an illusion, and white people are getting to learn that they made a big mistake. They made a great mistake of falling into it. But do we blame them? Yes, we do. Yes, we do, because it is because of them the United States is why it is today. All these problems succumbs down to whiteness. White people's weakness is whiteness. Yes, I'll repeat again. Mark these words. White people's weakness is whiteness. Can I explain it to you? Yes, I'm explaining it to you. You know, all these politicians that you're seeing today got the vulnerable part for white people to win their votes and to make them lose their minds, to lose their logics. Because I don't understand how somebody can come and lie to you about yourself and you fall for it. Because of the fear of losing whiteness, majority of white people have made dangerous decisions that are affecting America even today. White people's weakness is whiteness. So let me explain. The perceived privileges that white people had is what has made them be where they are. Majority of all these folks that even voted for Mr. Donald Trump, it is because Mr. Donald Trump appealed to them. He appealed for whiteness. And they knew, they believed that there will be coming some perceived privileges. And of course, those privileges came. But was it sustainable? No, it wasn't sustainable. That's how the elites work. The elites will always try to find a way of playing you. Once they play you, they leave you. And Trump has mastered that skill. Trump has mastered that book. The art of using your whiteness against you. And that's why majority of these white folks voted for Mr. Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump appealed to them as a white person. He didn't appeal to them as an American person who stands for all America. So you understand how whiteness is costing white people, and that's their weakness. That's their weakness, brothers and sisters, because majority of these people, when we talk about the Nebraska farmers, all these white farmers, all these rural suburban Americans that voted for Mr. Donald Trump, they voted because of those perceived privileges. And they believed that once they get everything that they want, everything's going to be fine. This problem started back early in the early 1960s or 1860s, yeah, when whiteness was created. Whiteness as a concept was created. The perceived privileges, white folks thought that that will be sustainable, that will be coming consistently. Wait until white farmers learn that they cannot get the USDA support. But what do black people say about this? Black people say that for the longest time, the government have been against them. And who has been running the United States? White people. So you see how this has been their enemy. And you see, with the deprivation that black people got, it helped them become resilient farmers. It helped them understand the importance of community. It helped them understand the importance of using resources sparingly. Right? So, I hope you get it. That is what went wrong with whiteness. Whiteness is not sustainable. And history has shown this. Whiteness is not sustainable. Whiteness is the idea of creating a better environment of white people, creating a better conditions for white people, making them have an inflated belief that they are better, that they deserve better than any other group. So I hope you all understand how all this comes to happen and where all this comes from. It is a concept that was created to make black people feel inferior, make white people feel superior. There's a comment that I want to read. Somebody said that on YouTube, there is a doc called The Bacons Rebellion. Oh, I think I've just talked to it in the introduction part of the video, and I've been describing it. Okay. Before this rebellion, and Irish people were also enslaved with blacks. After the rebellion, the wealthy whites had to figure out how to stop other groups from joining together against them. Yes, sir. The rich owners decided to use people that were the same color as overseers and brutally punished black people for anything. This is the beginning of race separation to keep control. There are more poor people than rich, and that has scared the rich. These separation methods are used to this date. It is true, and I just told you, Trump is a perfect example that used whiteness to appeal to majority of all these white folks that decided to vote for Mr. Donald Trump. Not that they couldn't vote for any other person or any other candidate, but it is the strategy of the elites that Trump used. And I told you that Trump knows the playbook very well. White people's ethnicities were not taken from them. They have numerous, that's parades, streets, fairs, bars, and restaurants built around their ethnicity within their ethnic languages. Around the US, any of them who lost knowledge of who they are was due to adoption and or are voluntarily moving away from their ethnic sounding names to blend in with Protestants, that's Anglo-America. That was a choice. They had the choice to keep those names and move back to Italy, Ireland. It was not like having your heritage stripped away from you because you were placed in a chattel slavery, and your children had their identity stripped away because babies were sold to people of other races. It is so new setting that white, even when meaning well, cannot tell the truth. At this point, I believe the inability to be honest and they center themselves as symmetrical victims with black people is in their soul. It's how they are made. So, brothers and sisters, please let me know what you think about this video. As you know, I'm your host and presenter, Agent Stories. Until then, let me see you on the next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.